Hello everyone, and welcome to I'll Allow It Nevada, the continuing judicial education podcast from the Nevada Supreme Court Administrative Office of the Courts. The purpose of these podcasts is to provide Nevada judges with another way to access accredited continuing education. I'm your host, Judicial Education Program Specialist Anne-Marie Mayeaux. In this episode, we will take a look at continuing judicial education requirements and mandatory education for new judges. Joining us is Assistant State Court Administrator John McCormick and State Judicial Educator David Gordon. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
So, David, let's start with the required education for new judges. When someone is appointed or elected to the bench, what education do they need to acquire?
Well, like so many things, Anne-Marie, it depends. First, it depends on the position the new judge is appointed to, specifically the jurisdiction. We'll have to discuss general jurisdiction judges who handle civil and criminal cases, general jurisdiction judges who are appointed to the family bench, and judges in rural areas with civil, criminal, and family jurisdiction.
And that's just the general jurisdiction bench. We'll also have to discuss required education for new limited jurisdiction judges.
That's right, John. Limited jurisdiction judges have their own required course at the National Judicial College, which we're going to refer to as the NJC. Limited jurisdiction judges are required to take a course titled Special Court Jurisdiction, the first time it's offered after their election or appointment.
I understand that special court jurisdiction is usually offered only once a year, in June. What happens if a judge is appointed late in the spring and the course is already full to capacity?
In that case, we'd ask the judge to send us some documentation that they tried to register for the course but couldn't, and we'll enter that documentation into their judicial education record.
Then the judge would be well advised to register for the next offering of special court jurisdiction, correct?
Right, Anne-Marie, but the NJC typically doesn't release the calendar for the next year until the fall, so the judge will have to set a reminder.
You know, I've seen listings for special court jurisdiction advanced. Is that a follow-up course?
Well, that's a really good question. The advanced designation applies to attorney judges. The fact is, the two listings are for the same course, but if a lay judge is attending, they will have some breakout sessions for additional education on the topic of evidence. It's the same course at the same time.
There is another required course for limited jurisdiction judges. It's the 4-day course called Ethics, Fairness, and Security in Your Courtroom and Community at the NJC, and it's usually offered in April and October.
Right, John. The requirement calls for completion within 24 months of election or appointment. On rare occasions, a judge may not be able to meet the requirement in time, and the Supreme Court order requiring the course allows for substitution, but judges should make every effort to attend the designated course.
And the requirement for ethics, fairness, and security in your courtroom and community extends to all new judges, regardless of jurisdiction?
That's right.
All right, speaking of other jurisdictions, what are the requirements for district court judges?
Well, because I used to be the rural courts coordinator, I can start with the requirements for district judges outside the 2nd and 8th judicial districts. They have civil, criminal, and family jurisdiction. So they're required to take general jurisdiction at the NJC within 12 months of taking office. In addition to the ethics requirements, they also are required to take the Institute for New Juvenile and Family Court Judges at the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, the NCJ-FCJ. The course must be taken within 24 months of taking office.
So John, can you kind of explain what rural courts are?
Usually when we talk about rural courts, particularly related to the district courts, we mean all those districts outside of the 2nd district covering Washoe County and the 8th judicial district for Clark County. Those districts covering the remaining 15 counties in the state.
And judges with family jurisdiction in the 2nd and 8th judicial districts also must take the Institute for New Juvenile and Family Court Judges, but for them, it has to be done within 12 months of taking office. And it follows that they have 24 months from taking office to complete the NJC's general jurisdiction course. Of course, the ethics requirement is the same.
Okay, so that leaves the district court judges within the 2nd and 8th judicial districts who have criminal and civil jurisdiction. They are required to take the NJC's general jurisdiction course within 12 months of taking office. And the ethics course requirement must be met within 24 months of election or appointment.
That's right, Anne-Marie, and that covers the requirement for mandatory new judge education.
So, David, I'm curious, with these new judge requirements, have any of the judges been disciplined for not complying?
We don't really have a record of disciplining the judges, Anne-Marie, but we have had a couple of instances. For instance, in 2014, we had a justice of the peace who was ordered by the Nevada Supreme Court to show cause for failing to comply with a Supreme Court order requiring mandatory new judge education. In about 2015, we had a justice of the peace who said that his health would keep him from attending mandatory training at the National Judicial College. That judge ended up resigning amidst pending action by the Judicial Discipline Commission. One of the results of that is that NRS 4.036 now specifies that if a justice of the peace or municipal court judge fails to attend special court jurisdiction in the allotted time, that they will forfeit their office. We understand that things happen. Occasionally the class is filled at the National Judicial College, or people have things, life events, that prevent them from attending at a specified time. If they can get an order of deferral from a district court judge in and for their county, we'll be happy to file that in the judicial education record. And then the responsibility is that they attend the next offering of that class.
Okay, so let's talk about continuing education requirements.
Well, they mirror those of the bar, meaning that judges must obtain 13 credits per year. Those credits break out as 10 general credits, 2 ethics credits, and 1 substance abuse and mental health credit, as it affects the legal profession. The carryover provisions also mirror those of the state bar.
So how do they get those credits?
There are several different options. The AOC offers 2 limited jurisdiction seminars and 1 district court judges seminar each year. These events are AOC-sponsored events and available to all sitting judges. Every 4 years, a judicial leadership summit is planned to bring judges from appellate, district, and limited jurisdiction courts together for a large event. When that happens, it absorbs both the annual district judge seminar and the limited jurisdiction judges summer seminar. Under specific guidelines and policies, the AOC will fund elective education for judges to attend events put on by providers such as the NJC, bar organizations, and other specialist organizations. Many of the states have mandatory continuing education for judges. We've covered what's required in Nevada. But looking at some other states, there are some really interesting things out there. Judicial education and the continuing education requirements are a lot like the word family. It can mean different things to different people. In Utah, for example, judges are required to get 30 hours of continuing education every year. Some of their training has to include harassment and abusive conduct prevention, as well as ethics, inclusion, and elimination of bias. Rhode Island is at the other end of that list, with only requiring 10 hours per year. They even allow 5 hours to be gained through authorship. 2 states, Arizona and Illinois, take the approach of having judges come to one central location and requiring their attendance. In Arizona, they have a mandatory annual conference. The Chief Justice of Arizona then puts out a court order that specifies that attendance at that conference meets the requirements for that year for every judge. If a judge is unable to attend, they have to get permission from the Chief Justice. In Illinois, where they have about 1,100 judges, half of them are required to come and get their 30 hours on one year, and half are required to get their 30 hours the next year. Their 30 hours covers a 2-year span. In Ohio, they have a Judicial College of Ohio. They have a requirement that every judge gets 40 hours of continuing education every 2 years. Of that 40 hours, 10 hours have to come from the Judicial College, and 3 of those must be on judicial conduct.
So, David, I find it fascinating to review the different judicial education requirements throughout the different states. And you are right on when you say that it's like a family, that every state is different. In addition to the ones that you shared, we also received information back from our NAJDA listserv that Alabama requires 12 hours per year. Minnesota requires 45 hours. That is within a 3-year reporting cycle. 3 of those credits must be diversity, equity, and inclusion. Michigan has 24 hours over a 2-year period, 6 hours in integrity and demeanor, which includes ethics, and 18 hours of judicial practice. The 12 hours are from mandatory judicial education credits. And then if we move on to Michigan, looking at 24 hours over a 2-year period, 6 hours in integrity and demeanor, which includes ethics, and 18 hours of judicial practice. 12 hours from mandatory judicial education. Kentucky is on 24 hours per biennium. Texas requires 16 hours per year. They break it down a little bit further. 4 hours of instruction may be obtained by electronic means. Mississippi has anywhere from 12 to 24 hours per year, depending on the category the judge is in. So, for example, their trial and appellate judges, as well as their municipal court judges, have to get 12 hours per year. That includes ethic and or professionalism. And I found this really interesting. Their justice court judges, after the election, are required to attend 80-hour orientation and pass a minimum competency exam prior to taking the bench. The annual training is 24 hours. Sometimes I'm sure the judges can find it difficult to honor these judicial education requirements. How would you suggest for a judge to handle a situation where they were struggling to acquire these credits that are required for their position?
Everybody has a life, and sometimes events get in the way of fulfilling the requirements for whatever reason. If you can't fulfill requirements, we ask the judges to let us know. Document it. Send us an email. We'll put that email into your judicial education record. An important aspect of the judicial education record is it's a public record. And anyone who goes through the process can gain access to that record. So we want to be sure that if there is an exception in the record, a deficiency, that we document why it's there, we justify it, and that we also have a plan for satisfying that requirement going forward. More information is better information.
Well, now we've talked about the actual requirements that judges are subject to in terms of education, but who pays for that education, David, and how does that work?
The funding process calls for an expenditure request form, an ER form, that can be found on the Budget and Travel webpage of the court's website. It needs to be submitted prior to the event for budgeting purposes. As a budgeting document, the ER form allows our accounting unit to encumber the appropriate funds.
It's important to understand as you complete this ER form that the amounts you're inputting are estimates. However, following the AOC's travel policy and procedures and using current GSA rates to complete this form will ensure that the total expenditure will be as accurate as possible. I'm sure John and David would agree that we always want to make sure there are no surprises when it comes to reimbursements. So if you're unsure, please feel free to reach out to anyone in judicial education or in accounting with questions and concerns. So that brings us to the ER process. David, can you explain that as well?
We will process the ER and return it. The returned ER with an approval stamp is the judge's authorization to incur the expense and anticipate reimbursement. Currently, the limit on that is up to $2,500. After the event, a judge is typically reimbursed through submitting a Supreme Court travel claim form found on that same website, with appropriate receipts for lodging, ground and air transportation, and registration, but not meals. The certificate of attendance should also be attached to the travel claim. Meal claims and lodging are subject to GSA rates in most cases.
Who does a judge submit an ER to when they want to attend education?
ER forms can be sent to the following email address: judicialed@nvcourts.nv.gov.
And when a judge submits his or her travel claim after attending the education, where do they send that document, David?
Travel claims are sent to aocaccounting@nvcourts.nv.gov. When booking travel, if you decide to book hotel and airfare together, please know that you will need to take active steps to separate out and document the amounts for each, because they are coded differently within budget categories, with policy limits on the amount specifically allowed for hotel stays, including GSA rate, taxes, and fees that must be verified before reimbursement can be paid. Claiming a $700 amount for both airfare and hotel is not enough detail to stand up to third-party audits. It may appear that such packaging saves money, and it may do so on the front end, but it will probably cause more work for both the AOC and the traveler on the back end.
There will be times that a judge will need to rent a vehicle when traveling to an educational event. What specific direction, David, can you offer to help with this process?
When renting a vehicle for transport related to continuing education, be sure to use one of the state contracted vendors. You can find them on the state purchasing website. Travelers should rent a compact or midsize vehicle, and the AOC will not reimburse for upgrades, such as, but not limited to, GPS and satellite radio. Arrangements can be made for larger vehicles if travelers are sharing with others, subject to Supreme Court travel policy and guideline.
And David, if I'm not mistaken, those two rental companies are Enterprise and Hertz, right?
That's correct.
So David, I'm wondering, are there restrictions on the type of education that the AOC can pay for?
Well, there are some restrictions, John. For instance, we will not reimburse anyone for CLE afloat.
And just to clarify for our audience, what afloat means is any CLE accredited courses that are offered while on a cruise ship.
We typically expect that CLE will take place in North America, and all CLE must be accredited either specifically or by a reciprocal agreement with the Nevada Bar.
Thank you, David, for reviewing the restrictions on judicial education reimbursements. On another topic, I have seen expenditure requests come in that have a notice of a scholarship attached to it. I'm sure our audience would like to know more about these scholarships.
Sometimes the NJC provides scholarships towards the tuition of a course. Scholarships can range from $500 to the full amount of tuition, but they don't cover the additional conference fee for live courses, where the conference fee covers meals and other expenses for participation. That's important to remember as you submit an expenditure request.
And to David, if you do receive a scholarship, it's best if you send that scholarship letter in with your ER submission so that we have it notated and we've got a way to track it.
That's right, Anne-Marie. Always remember more information is better, and will probably smooth the process for you.
And Anne-Marie, you've been coordinating a robust distance education effort, right?
You know what, John, that's right. The Judicial Education Unit has been providing webinars since 2009. In addition to offering these webinars live, we also record them for future viewing. We maintain a library of continuing judicial education on a wide variety of topics. This library is located on our Distance Education Learning Portal, or DELP. Once those webinars are accredited for CLE, the recordings are valid for 3 years. Our topics range from medical malpractice to substance abuse, digital evidence to legal writing, and much more.
And to access this library, you have to have an account. If you're a Nevada State Court employee and are interested in accessing our Distance Education Learning Portal, or DELP, please send a request to our Distance Education email, which is distanceeducationprogram@nvcourts.nv.gov.
We are always updating this library with current legal education topics, which allows you to continually find CLE accredited trainings.
And now, Anne-Marie, you're leading our efforts on providing continuing education via podcast.
And we're so excited about these podcasts because they will be 30 minutes and they'll be accredited and also valid for 3 years.
We recognize that our Nevada judges are very busy, and there's a need for quality CLE accredited judicial education that can be accessed quickly and easily. I'll Allow It Nevada can be located not only on our Distance Education Learning Portal, or DELP, but also on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio, just to name a few. These episodes will include new and current topics, as well as refresher topics. Our Nevada judges will now be able to receive CLE while taking a walk, traveling, or just relaxing at home as they listen to these podcast episodes. Our hope is to have a full library of podcast episodes by the end of 2023. And we will get there with your help, of course. We are always interested in what you, our audience, would like to hear on this Judicial Education podcast. If you have any topics in mind that you want covered and faculty for topics, please send those suggestions to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov.
Are there any other details about continuing education that we should include for the audience?
Yeah, John, thanks for that question. Lay judges only need to report their continuing education credits to us at the AOC's Judicial Education Unit, but attorney judges have a dual reporting requirement and need to report to both the AOC and the bar. Judicial education is only recorded from the date a judge takes the bench, so credit previously carried over as an attorney cannot be applied to the judicial education requirement.
And when a judge reports continuing education credit to the AOC, it is entered into their judicial education record. That record is a public record and available to anyone who follows the procedures for a records request. If that does occur, the judge is notified and given a chance to review their record and submit any credit that may not have been accounted for.
Now, the Judicial Education Unit sends the judicial education record out to each judge at least once a year, correct?
Yes, that's right. We have a deadline of September, but we try to get those reports out to the judges in August. Sometimes judges may notice discrepancies between our records and those of the bar. There are a few different reasons that could be the case. The bar rounds credit down to the lowest half hour, and the AOC does not have that requirement. Sometimes a judge may report to one organization and not to the other.
But it truly is up to the judge to interpret their record and notify us of any needed corrections.
That's correct. The staff here can tell a judge if they appear to be in compliance, but the ultimate responsibility rests on the judge.
So do we have recognition of achievement for the different levels of education that a judge might reach?
Yes, we do. Most judges can get a basic achievement award in judicial education by completing 240 hours. A large portion of that 240 hours can be gained through the mandatory new judge education. At 440 hours of judicial education, we present an advanced achievement certificate. And at 640 hours, we present a distinguished achievement award in judicial education. At 1,000 hours of continuing education, we present a certificate and an accompanying statute. An additional award that we have, seldom achieved, is a joint award with the National Judicial College, where a judge will have taken 15 resident courses, and that's interpreted to mean in person, not virtual. And when they get that, they get a plaque from the National Judicial College, and the AOC puts their name on a plaque that we have that lists the judges who have achieved that award.
I know that we're always looking for faculty for a lot of our events. Do we have any kind of recognition for those judges who offer to be faculty?
That's a good question, Anne-Marie. Thank you. We have instituted a Distinguished Faculty Award for any judge who has contributed 12 teaching hours to the Judicial Education Unit and their colleagues.
So how do you decide on faculty for different presentations? Where do you get the faculty from?
Many of our faculty are recommended to us by the judges themselves. Sometimes we work with people that we have a close working relationship with at the National Judicial College to get some faculty. A lot of it comes from research. Sometimes we identify subject matter experts and keep a database of them so that we can call on somebody who's an expert in, for instance, medical malpractice or water law or custody issues.
So it sounds like it's from a variety of places.
It is a variety of places, and we are always looking for new people. We are always looking for new resources. Some of the audience might be wondering what brings people to judicial education. Our judicial educators are a diverse group. We have people that have education backgrounds. We have people that have leadership backgrounds. We design curricula. We do logistics. Every year, we attend the National Association of State Judicial Educators annual conference. That's a place where we can exchange tips and ideas with our counterparts in other states, and we can view presentations about bringing more effective educational techniques to our judges. Some of our judicial educators have participated in the Certified Court Manager program, gaining a lot of background in court operations.
Well, this has been a very informative episode. To summarize, we've covered the new judge judicial education requirements, which include the general jurisdiction judges who handle civil and criminal cases, general jurisdiction judges who are appointed to the family bench, and judges in rural areas with civil, criminal, and family jurisdiction, as well as the requirements for new limited jurisdiction judges. We've also reviewed where our judges can acquire a lot of this education, not only live but also virtual means, including what the AOC offers, and to review whenever our Nevada judges do acquire some judicial education, accredited CLE or CJE, it is important to remember to not only send that certificate of attendance to the State Bar of Nevada, but also to the Judicial Education Unit here at the Supreme Court of Nevada, Administrative Office of the Courts. This includes any of our virtual presentations. And David also reviewed where you can find a lot of these forms and some of the emails that you are to send this information into. You're welcome to send any questions or inquiries that you have from these podcasts to the jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov email address, and we will respond as soon as possible. David, thank you also for reviewing all of the education funding procedures. We also have a webinar on DELP on how to run through all of the paperwork for judicial education funding. And two, remember, we will be sending out the judicial education records to all of our Nevada judges by the end of September every year for you to review. And we do encourage that if you see any discrepancies on those reports, to please let us know so that we can have accurate judicial education reports for you. Well, that wraps up this episode of I'll Allow It Nevada Judicial Education Requirements. If you would like to receive CLE or CJE credits for this 30-minute episode, please complete a certificate of attendance that is located on the Judicial Education Overview website page under Documents, and email that completed COA to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. And stay tuned for more I'll Allow It Nevada episodes coming soon. We will be publishing a new episode every third Friday of the month. And before we close, I'd like to share a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. "The secret of education lies in respecting the pupil." John and David, thank you for your willingness to provide information on this important topic. Until next time, this is Anne-Marie Mayeaux, and I thank you for listening. Take care.